Ain't no way they did that without a call from the streets. I just want to know who made that call.
Who you think made it?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking y'all to see what these police is talking about.
We'll reach out to our peoples.
Now, after weeks of the mystery question in terms of who was the one behind the hit on Sean Famous Figueroa, after the weeks of investigation and speculation, ruling certain characters out based on motive, timeline, and a storyline perspective, it was Snaps and Pop, the two characters who are arguably the most powerful players at this moment in time. They're sat in their restaurant for majority of Raising Kanan, haven't even stepped foot outside apart from in episode 408, but yet, they're the ones who actually hold the keys to the entire kingdom. From the comfort of their own restaurant, they get all the information delivered to them. People come to them for answers, alliances, or business proposals. They also have law enforcement in their back pocket. They're feared, respected, and masters of the game. They really are in control over the chessboard more than we first thought, especially because they were the ones who called the hit on Fame. I also got asked a question earlier on. I thought Snaps and Pop were retired, but I said, can you really ever be retired from the game?
Fiend for that shit. Just like a B said, fiend for that crack round. The game feel good. If it didn't, nobody would die for it.
Kanan's narration at the end of 408 said that Hustlers got the same Jones for the game, and I do think Snaps and Pop are still in the game, but they're playing it very different. However, now that it has been revealed they were the ones behind Famous's death, the question now turns to, what's next? What's the next move for Snaps and Pop? Because Kanan definitely ain't gonna let this shit go. He wants someone to pay for what happened to Fame, so does Duke, so does Lou. So, how do they play this going forward? Because boy are they playing the shit out of Kanan at this moment in time. This isn't the same character we saw on Power, who was the one who was doing all the manipulating. This isn't the same character who will later probably manipulate Ghost and Tommy to a certain extent in Power Origins. I've got a very funny feeling they're going to be throwing the blame in Rock's direction, and manipulating Kanan even more. And that's the main topic of this breakdown. As we run through the game Snaps and Pop have been playing with Kanan and so much more, there's a lot to unpack with this topic. So let's start with a few clues in terms of how and why Snaps and Pop had Famous killed.
Kanan says you talk a lot. You for real? You said that shit?
Now the main issue around Fame was the fact he talked way too much. We can go back to season 1 and pick a number of examples. There was the one where he said Davina was a rat in front of Juliana, or when he was rapping about killing Freddie Williams. The list can go on and on and on. Now if we were to circle back to my introduction, I mentioned how Snaps and Pop didn't even need to step outside their restaurant to control the chessboard. People came to them with information. People came to them to conduct business in their backyard. Everyone would love to be backed by Snaps and Pop. So I wouldn't be surprised if the information actually came from Ronnie. He's someone who warned Kanan Famous talked way too much, and the information could have actually been fed back to them back in season 3. Remember, we didn't peep it the way we needed to. Number 2, they also had a lot of connections within the NYPD and also law enforcement. We know how powerful Snaps and Pop are in that aspect. If and when Famous was brought in for questioning, I'm sure word would have got back to them that this kid is talking way too much. So, that's how Snaps and Pop could have known. In terms of why they wanted to get rid of Fame, there's two main reasons. Like they told Pickett and Wiley, they were afraid that some of the shit he was saying could have been traced back to them. From what Famous was saying could have been traced back to Kanan, who happens to be an associate of Snaps and Pop, who actually gave the go-ahead for Kanan to get rid of Ronnie. That okay came from Snaps and Pop, and who are law enforcement linking to Ronnie Mathis, Detective Howard. So Fame assisting in the death of Detective Howard could have had a huge knock-on effect. Number 2, they needed to protect their asset. That's what Kanan is to them. He's an asset. And when you have an asset that's bringing you a steady stream of income, you protect it. And in a way, they were protecting their investment in Kanan. If they lose him, they lose someone who they're very fond of, someone who they believe that can go to the very top of this drug game. And well, if he does reach his full potential, with the guidance and mentorship of people like Snaps and Pop, that could only mean more money going into Snaps and Pop's back pocket as Kanan makes his way up. This is why in essence they want control over the prince. Detective Howard said it back in season 1, Rock is the queen and this is the prince, the son of Defcon Stark. Although I don't think many people know that Kanan's father was Detective Howard. I don't think Snaps and Pop know either, unless they really are in the know. I'm sure that's something they probably don't know. But why wouldn't they want control over Rock's son? Think about who she is. Why not control someone who's in the same mold as Rock? He caught it way back in 402. Snap said that his loyalty to Rock was questionable at best, and that's when he was probably thinking he can use this to his advantage. With that being said, that brings us perfectly onto how I think Snaps and Pop will manipulate Kanan into thinking it was Rock. their next move going into 409, 410, and maybe even into Season 5. Now, Kanan is someone who's definitely not going to let this go. He's going to want answers to who called a hit on Fame. I don't believe he wants the law enforcement officers as much. That I guess would be a bonus. But killing law enforcement officers is never a good idea.
Who you think made it?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking y'all to see what these police is talking about.
In 408, we had Snaps questioning Kanan, because I think they were trying to get a feel of whether he had an inkling of whether it was them. What was Kanan thinking? Who did he think was behind the hit? Because the streets do talk, and he has to have his eye on someone, and he does. That's why the dog barked. He was lying when he said he didn't. At this moment in time, he believes it's Rock. That's based on seeing her pay these two law enforcement officers back at the end of 407. Now, who knows if that bit of information in terms of Kanan believing it was Rock? There are only two people at this moment in time. Duke is one, but the other is Crystal. And who do they have at this moment in time held hostage? Crystal. I do think they're probably going to get the information out of her in terms of what Kanan's thinking and who he thinks it is. And look, if Crystal does talk and gives Snaps and Pop what they want, we genuinely can't blame her. This is someone who's been real with Kanan from day one. Putting the shit aside with Duke from Season 3, which she also has apologized for, she has been a real one. She didn't even tell Rock what Kanan was thinking when she asked. But her being here, she definitely doesn't deserve this. But I wouldn't be surprised if she told Snaps and Pop Kanan believes it's Rock because of the position she is in, life or death. Now, whether she's killed afterwards, I hope not, but you just never know. Just how ruthless are Snaps and Pop? If they do get rid of Crystal, then shit, even I may have to roll out for Kanan and Duke. But that's how I probably think they're going to be able to get the information in terms of Kanan believing that it's Rock, and once they do, that's when they can really start turning the screw. That's when they can really manipulate Kanan even more, and play on what Snaps knows from episode 402. His loyalty to Rock is questionable. Pop also said in 407, the whole unique situation sounds like something from Rock's playbook. Kanan is going to come back to Snaps and Pop at some point in the near future, and ask them what they've heard back from their law enforcement friends, and they are going to have to give him something, because Kanan ain't going to stop until he finds out who called the hit. And what do Snaps and Pop want? They first need to keep Kanan off their scent for sure, but they also want control over Kanan. They want him under their wing. They want to mold and nurture him because they believe he's someone who's going right to the very top. But to keep control over someone like Kanan, Rock's gotta go. You gotta create a divide with Kanan and the Thomases, Kanan and Duke. And this is where I think they're gonna manipulate Kanan into thinking it was Rock, feeding him even more false information, which falls into the theory they're probably gonna get it out of Crystal, and what Snaps and Pop saw back in 402 in terms of Kanan's loyalty to Rock. Like I mentioned before in the introduction, these are two very powerful chess players. They're actually the ones in control because of how much respect they have, what they know, how people come to them and tell them the ins and outs of what's going on in the streets. Again, Pop said it back in Season 3, people come and tell them shit because of who they are, what they've done and the position they're in. They've just been sitting back and letting the chaos unfold. And exactly like Snap said, could be trouble or could be an opportunity. He's looking at this entire situation as an opportunity. So, them sending Kanan in Rock's direction is just a perfect chess game from their point of view, because it also falls in line with Kanan's own theory. It causes tension and a break between Kanan and the Thomases, and allows Snaps and Pop even more control over Kanan. Shit, they may even tell Kanan that Rock had something to do with Crystal's disappearance. Where was Crystal last seen? Who did she last speak to before she disappeared? I wouldn't be surprised if they also feed that into Kanan, just pushing him even further down Rock's direction. In terms of OC's death, if they want to really turn the screw even more, why not tell Kanan that Rock was behind that one too? Over the course of Season 4, most so after episode 405, we've even spoke about Rock's story being very similar to the boy who cried wolf. She's innocent. Well, not quite innocent, but she's innocent in terms of what she's been accused of in Season 4 with Unique and Fame. Kanan's been looking in Rock's direction. He's so fixated on Rock because of the lies and manipulation from before. Even though Rock warned Kanan about how powerful Snaps and Pop were back in 402. But again, you take a look at that situation, and when Rock was genuinely giving Kanan advice in terms of Snaps and Pop aren't people you want to mess with, they've not got to where they've got to without dropping hell of a lot of bodies, Kanan turned it back on Rock. Like Crystal mentioned back in 408, he's so fixated on the things that Rock's done over the last few seasons, he can't see anything else, when in fact, Rock has genuinely got no reason to lie to Kanan anymore. The cat's out the bag. All the secrets are pretty much revealed in terms of who she is, what she's done. There is no reason to lie to Kanan anymore. But all of this now just plays straight into Snaps and Pops' game plan. If they need to blame it on someone, why not blame it on the one person who gets the blame for everything? Rock. Patina Miller even said not too long ago, Rock gets the blame for everything. When something goes wrong, they all look at Rock, just like Kanan is. I also do think this happens because of Snaps and Pop. Unique and Kanan potentially teaming up only further causes a divide between not just Rock and Kanan, but also Rock and the other Thomases, Jukebox, Lou, Marvin. However, in the grand scheme of things, I do think this also genuinely sets up Kanan versus Snaps, Pop and Unique in the long term, because Kanan is being played like a pawn on the chessboard at this moment in time. Snaps and Pop are sending him round in circles, they're manipulating him and playing him with so much ease, and it really isn't the character we know from Power. In Power, he was the master manipulator, he was the chess player, but all this will do is add to his growth. He's gonna need to go through this because it is gonna teach him that there are no friends in the streets. Remember what he said back in Power Season 2 Episode 2?
Come on, man, ain't no friends out here on these streets.
None of these guys are his friends, and when he does find out, I do want to see him team up with Duke, I want to see him team up with Rock, Lou and Marvin. I would love to see a situation where the entire Thomas family come together to bring down Snaps, Pop, Unique, and all these powerful players. I do think we are in for a clearing of the chessboard in Season 5 at some point, but then the introduction to Breeze come in a bit later on, because you look at the situation now and you think, how does Breeze even fit? There are so many moving chess pieces at this moment in time, it makes no sense for him to come in when there are so many powerful players such as Snaps, Pop, Unique, and the Thomases in Queens. For Kanan to work under Breeze, Snaps, Pop, and Unique and the Thomases have to be out the picture at that point. I think they're going to have to clear the chessboard in Season 5 with the old guard, to then bring in the new guard. And I do feel like they are setting up Kanan to bring down everyone, that's once he does realise the truth. I really do hope he realises before it's too late, and where we see him teaming up with Duke and maybe the rest of the Thomases. One of my biggest fears of raising Kanan was how they'd go down a similar route to Power, just like Tariq killed Ghost. Raising Kanan has been very well written so far, and I do think it would be quite cliche for them to run with the same story that we saw at the end of Power. I've always said I hope they take a different approach come the end of Raising Kanan, and I can actually see them coming away from that, which does sound crazy at this moment, because of how I mentioned Snaps and Pop will probably manipulate him even further against Rock, but as I've said before, taking a long-term view in terms of this plot, you also have to wonder, when will Kanan learn the truth? At some point he has to find out these guys who he's in business with have been manipulating him. Snaps and Pop were the ones behind Famous's death. Snaps and Pop were also connected to Crystal being held hostage and her disappearance, maybe potentially even her being killed. OC was killed by Unique. Unique was the one who robbed him not once but twice, the second time through OC. So, I can eventually see in this situation doing a full circle where Kanan does eventually learn the truth, and where he eventually turns on every single one of these guys. Just like Joyce Thomas told him earlier on in Season 4, Rock is still his mother. The story of raising Kanan, the heartbeat of this show is Rock and Kanan's relationship, and I do think a lot of people are expecting Kanan to continue turning against his mother, which I do think he will in the short term, but in the long term, I do think he's going to realise the real enemy is standing right in front of him. The real enemy is Snaps and Pop for what they did to Fame. The real enemy is Unique for what he forced OC to do. They are going to have to pay for what they did to Fame. It's going to have to happen. They just simply can't get away with it, and I don't think they will. Kanan will definitely make them pay. It's just a question of how does he find out? But in the short term, the next move from Snaps and Pop will no doubt to be blame it on someone else, and there's no better person than to blame it on Rock. In the long term, Kanan will definitely turn the tables, that's for sure. He won't always be the character who's being played like a fiddle. This is a learning curve for him. He has to go through this to turn him into that master manipulator we saw in Power. But that's a breakdown of where we are with the situation with Snaps and Pop, and how I think their next move is to pin the hit on Fame and also Crystal's disappearance on Rock, have him team up with Unique. But in the long term, I also think it's a setup for their downfall, because eventually Kanan does have to learn the truth. So, drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section, and let me know what you think of Snaps and Pop's next move. Will it be them pinning it on Rock? Drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.